May this find who it needs to find. We are here to talk about toxic family dynamics and spiritual oppression. So, oftentimes, spiritual oppression and a lot of the traumas that we experience it from such a young age. And our first offenders are usually our family. Um, so, if you've grown up in what they call now a narcissistic household, if you consider yourself the black sheep of the family, if there was maybe like a golden child, um, who maybe, the family has tried to destiny swap your destiny with the golden child, usually a child who usually ends up being an enemy to you, a karmic to you, or ends up being a karmic to the black sheep. This video is for you if you're just wanting to learn more about, maybe you know someone who went through this, or you're not sure whether this is you or not, or you're not sure whether you played a part in it. Because there's always a way to walk away. There's always a way to not be a part of that family dynamic anymore. There are a lot of people nowadays who are cutting off their family, cutting off their parents, going no contact because of the lack of accountability and the abuse that they experience. Often, sometimes on a spiritual level, and then that translate into emotional, physical, and mental abuse. So my toxic family dynamic, and this is very common too, was that I had an emotionally unavailable father. He was an avoidant. He also was a enabler. And then I had a mother who was a narcissist. I don't know if I would call her, so he was a covert narcissist and she was an overt narcissist. Because a lot of the things she did, she was very manipulative. She had bipolar disorder, where she was manic one day, depressed the next. Or actually, it doesn't really go from day to day with her, at least. It was drawn out. I had 3 older siblings. I was the youngest. They say a lot of older girls experience this, but I was the youngest. I think I was the most spiritually mature, so I guess that's why the older girl, maybe they're more spiritually mature. I grew up in a very chaotic household where my older sister really, she could do no wrong, but she often contributed to a lot of the chaos in the house. I had to grow up very early. I learned to be the peacemaker very early because it was so much chaos all the time. I didn't want to add on to it. I had 2 very much so older brothers, 6 years plus, 6 to 10 years. There was 2 of them, and we had different fathers, and there was a disconnect there because they would always make me and my sister feel guilty for having a father. There was a lot of jealousy there. Our paths kind of looked different, even though it didn't. They grew up with their grandmother, which their grandmother, she was my mother's mother, and that was a karmic line, a very karmic motherly line, where mother to daughter, my mother was the black sheep of her siblings. And so my mother treated her awful. But I was the black sheep of my family, so my mother tried to pass that on to me as well. But, I've broken it, going no contact. I intend to go no contact again because, there's just things that you notice and you're just like, you know what, this is still not okay. You're still making excuses. You're still, on a war path. So I guess I should tell you about a dream that I had. So it's like, it's kind of like getting to the root of why black sheeps exist in the first place. Everyone has a little bit of spiritual abilities, right? And some of us are very spiritual, and you would just never know it. Sometimes it comes in the form of dreams, prophetic dreams. Sometimes it comes in the form of prophetic visions, right? So when I was in my mother's stomach, and she's told me this, she got a lot of dreams about me, what I would become, what I would do. And she's mentioned it several times, even as I've stayed here. Actually, like a couple days before my birthday, she mentioned it. And I think it was just, she saw me breaking the generational curse of poverty, of scarcity. And it's not in a way of, oh, you come from, because I come from Section 8 and like poverty, below poverty level. Oh, you come from that. Oh, now you have a nice house, No. I mean, like, millionaire, break the generational curse. Like, actually breaking the generational curse. Not nothing small time. Even though it's nice, it's wonderful, but she saw me breaking the generational curse of poverty, and it just disturbed something in her spirit where, I don't know, maybe she was destined for more at one point, but she couldn't break the curse. So she became like very irate that I was sent in to break it. And it was basically, while I was in her stomach, it was already foretold that it was to be my destiny to do that. So basically it was like, it was no doubt about it. So, I've always had a bright light. I've always had a wonderful smile. People were like, oh, your smile, you can light up a room. And what I end up becoming for my family is kind of an unlimited supply of like the divine, I often experience a lot of nightmares when I was young. Like, I was plagued by recurring dreams. So that was them sending negative energy towards me, and it was like the same dream of me trying to run away, me trying to get away from an entity. Sometimes I would be familiar with it if I watched a scary movie. My mother would indoctrinate me with scary movies at a really young age. I remember I was like 5, 6, or 7, and she turned on Event Horizon and she went to sleep. And so I was up watching Event Horizon by myself. And a couple years ago, in like 2024, I had to rewatch the movie because I was terrified. I was terrified of that movie. And then, like, I had grew to love scary movies, like, in middle school and then high school. And then once I went on my journey, I kind of cut it off. But even rewatching it, I'm like, yo, this scary movie was no joke. Like, forget a Conjuring, forget it. That scary movie was no joke. If y'all ever seen Event Horizon with Lawrence Fishburne in it, oh my gosh. And those are like solar plexus attacks. And I remember it got to a point where when I was little, every time they would turn a scary movie on, I would know it by the music, and I would get up and run. Sometimes they wouldn't even tell me. Like, they would make it a family thing. Like, everybody's sitting downstairs. Oh, let's have family time. And me, loving this family time, me wanting to be the healer, me wanting to bring everybody together, I would always want to, be around, wanting love. Those were direct shocks to my solar plexus chakra. Watching movies where there was nudity, watching movies that was just very inappropriate. I remember when Get Rich or Die Trying, that was like in 2006. Like, I'm still in elementary school. We're watching movies like that together, and And those are just, you know, you being exposed to darkness at such a young age. Those are attacks to your solar plexus chakra. Um, I have a faint memory from when I was under 5 of my mother stabbing my father in the shoulder. You know, there was always police there, always chaos, always yelling, explosive arguments. You know, a lot of times we didn't have food. Um, and I'm saying all this to say toxic family dynamics, right? If you grew up in complete hell, right? I know some people just think, oh yeah, well your parents were on drugs, like what do you expect? Da, da, da. No, these are things that happen to attack. I don't, they want to destabilize you. They want to destabilize, you know, the black child in the family. They want the black child because my mother, you know, she grew up, even though it wasn't a 2-parent household, my mother often experienced the same things. You know, my grandmother wasn't on drugs at the time, but it manifests in different ways depending on how the parents go about it, or the parent, you know. Like, she was molested at a young age. She, you know, was abused, you know. She had her birthdays made to feel like crap, you know. And her mother's mother experienced the same thing with her mother. It's a generational curse. And the reason why I'm saying it like that is because it's not just because, oh, they're this, or they're that, or they're this, or they're that, right? No, 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 because everybody in those situations don't experience some of the odd things that black sheeps of the family have experienced. I suffered with extreme anxiety. I remember the first day before 5th grade, I couldn't make it to, before 6th grade, I couldn't go to school because I was throwing up with I was having a panic attack. I was throwing up everywhere. It's not normal, you know? You know, me and my brothers and sisters, we would sit around our mother and have roast sessions. And the roast session would always end up coming on me. Always. I could never go a session without, you know, and here I am, the youngest of them all, and, you know, they're finding things to tear me down. It's just been very interesting. I had really so much a lack of a childhood. You know, I was always giddy. I was always happy. They used to call me happy-go-lucky. They used to call me ditzy, in my own world. You know, I loved nature. I loved being out in nature. I loved to pick flowers. But they will always find a way to criticize and demean and demonize who I was. And whenever there was a big argument, you know, because eventually in middle school, my sister started arguing. You know, she started having these chaotic outbursts. She started participating in the chaos. And I used to look at the chaos. I used to look at what she was doing as not chaos, as actually her standing up for, you know, because she used to, you know, be arguing about the lack of food, but yet they had beer and that they were high, you know. And I used to like admire her. But in actuality, it never stopped. It never really changed. And all it did was, one, create a guilty complex within me, because instead of me adding to the chaos, I kept the peace. But when it was all said and done, when my aunts used to come get us, and because, you know, they'll be ready to fight, they would ask me why didn't I say anything, and she would express the fact that I didn't stand up for her. But maturing now is me realizing that I was not adding to the chaos, and I'm being criticized and demonized and made to feel guilty and made to feel less than, as if I didn't have any courage, because I chose the harder route, which was to keep the peace in a household that seems to thrive on chaos. So that's an example. That's something that you have to heal from. And that's why it's like spiritually oppressive, because you start to think of yourself as less than. My light is less than. Me being happy and free, me being peaceful. I am a healer. You know, a lot of those situations, if they didn't blow up, I would kind of calm it down. It's okay, it's okay. No, 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 no. But then I was oppressed to think that my healing, my light, wasn't a good thing. You know, we used to struggle a lot, and even having my brothers kind of put that guilt on, they did it to both of us, about having a father when he was a part of the problem, you know? Being made to feel like you had to be grateful for a part of your abuse, for a part of your trauma, is twisted. You know, when you really realize at the core of things that you being who you are, you just lighting up a room, is what kind of drove those happy memories when they were happy memories, and what stopped a lot of situations from going straight down, because you were there. You know, thinking about how, you know, the people in your family might have been blessed just so some blessings could get to you, just so peace could get to you. And often what happens with this black sheep is all the things that they've done energetically, physically, otherwise, is discarded. So I became a really great role model, like throughout mid-high school, you know, and all throughout, you know, maintaining great grades. Sometimes, you know, I would dip. I remember the first quarter of my 7th grade science class, I just lost all umph. I just couldn't do it. I was getting tired. I was getting energetically tired of the same thing. Going to school, starting school, not having supplies, worrying about, like, you know, not having breakfast, not eating, just certain things. Like, I just was tired of it. And summer is what really supposed to replenish you, but summers never did. Summers were okay. They were okay. But being at home in a dysfunctional and toxic family, you're more exposed to the chaos. There's more opportunities for chaos, and my mother wasn't one that was gonna let us out of the house. You know, she liked to safeguard, probably so we wouldn't tell other people what was going on. So by the time you get back to school and you're ready to start, you're even more depleted than when you ended the last school year. So mama duties call. Okay, but I was saying that when you do get a footing on things, you know, I had got a footing on things in my older years. You know, I had got a job. Instead of adding to the chaos, I was like, okay, when it's time for me to get a job, that's exactly what I'm gonna do. I'm not gonna keep fussing and moaning about something that I know they're not gonna do. I'll do it for myself. And then I worked all throughout college, and again, I became a nurse. And you know, I had an older sister who, like I said, she was 2 years above me, and when she was a nurse as well. It was the type of dynamic where, you know, you want to help your younger sister out. You know, I did college all on my own, despite having, you know, if there was something that I didn't understand, she was not there to help. She used to always say things, even since middle school, she used to always say things like, well, I had to go through this, so why doesn't she have to go through it? You know? And I did it on my own, so she needs to do it on her own. You know, this was the type of older sister I had, and mind you, we're only 20 months apart. So I got through college, and I developed an anxiety disorder where I had frequent panic attacks. I had social anxiety. My confidence was very diminished. I was still outgoing, you know, because you can't do this like that much, but I was going through it, and hindsight is like I was starting to go through really strong spiritual attacks, because as you start to rise and you become less accessible, I wasn't in the house all the time. I was working, I was doing my own thing. The more they try to siphon your energy, so that as you start to burn brighter, it's like, ooh, I can siphon more. And so they try to siphon more energy. Um, and so I was going through really, really like terrible anxiety attacks. I didn't feel safe. I never felt safe. And that's another thing too, growing up, I never felt safe, even in my own home. I still haven't found a home where I feel safe. I feel safe within myself now. This is why I'm so, glad like I gained all this weight, because it's like I feel safe within myself, which is why I started dealing with weight fluctuations. I would drop from a size 7 all the way down to a size 0, like that, like within a couple months. And then I would have to build it back up. That's the physical representation of the spiritual energy siphon. I would literally start to wither down to nothing. Lack of support, doing everything by myself, still dealing with the chaos because I still live with my parents, because then it became like a chain. So I was so used to being the peacemaker. I was so used to being the glue that held everything together, that it became automatic. It became people pleasing. It became, embedded within me that, I had to hold everything together. It became subconscious. Like, you have to be there to hold everything together. Sometimes now I realize that's the case, because even now when I think about it, and I've heard the things that happened when I did go no, I went no contact for like 2 years. And the things that happened, like everything was tush. And now that I'm back, things are still going downhill because I've called back my energy. I know things are either going to hit even more rock bottom once I leave again. And sometimes that comes across my mind instead of a save me first, because it's like, girl, get out of here. It's not good for you. This is a toxic environment. It's kind of weighed down on me. So anyways, I got it through, got a brand new car as soon as I graduated, doing my thing, living life, still trying to do what I'm doing, going to places like Vegas and Los Angeles, like just trying to do, all while battling, this intense spiritual warfare. So I became like a really good role model for like my nieces and the people younger than me. But there's this thing, this toxic family dynamic, or it's even maybe something like other black sheeps have experienced, where people will take from you like the lessons and the things that you've done. People will try to take from you, but they will discard you. So I'm a very emotional person, and I was really going through it during those times. So I was always there for people, but they never returned the favor. In my darkest of times, I had to stand on my own 2 feet. I had to do this with people older than me. I had to do this with people younger than me. I had to do it with my siblings, and it just became to a point where I was just used to being rejected and abandoned, where it's like the example I set was good enough, but I'm not good enough. And that kind of creates this very toxic, just this wound of rejection and abandonment, where you don't feel good enough. And now you operate from a point of what you do for others, what you can do for others, what you can show for others, which is something where it's like, it's weird, because my soul's purpose is to help others, but it's something that I have, that I'm healing, because I have to realize that this is not it and this is not all. Like, I'm more than this. So that can be a thing. I've dealt with a lot of sabotage, you know, where I felt like because we were so spiritually interconnected, that my spiritual sovereignty was lost at an early age. Narcissist households, this is the thing too, where they act as monitoring spirits, where they want to know everything that you're doing. They want to keep tabs on what you're doing. So you begin to think that's normal. So you begin to run by every decision by them. You start to lose your spiritual authority, your spiritual autonomy, your spiritual sovereignty. And you really start to think like, these people are for me, this is just them, this is just it, and you begin to run, and then that becomes a way for them to monitor you. And next thing you know, every time you tell them something that you want to do, something that you did do, it goes horribly wrong. It starts to fall apart. It starts to implode. If you've dealt with toxic family dynamics, betrayal might be something that's common, where it's often swept under the rug. It's okay, they'll make up when people do things to each other. Gossip, rumors, big blowouts that is often disregarded. Like, it's never fully addressed. The real issue is never fully addressed. It's always just a week go by, a couple days go by, and you're back to normal. You're back to normal, right? And that's just deconditioning you, or that's conditioning you to accept abuse, accept betrayal, accept trauma, accept a lack of accountability. So this is less of me like telling you how to navigate it, because it takes a lot, right? To kind of work through those things, and I will be posting videos about that. But this is kind of just like a hey, you may not know, but these things are not normal. Because for the longest, I thought that these things were normal. Because a lot of times, what these spiritual vultures, especially if they're your family, what they'll do is they'll isolate you pretty early. So pretty early, they'll let you know that you don't talk about family business outside of the family. Like, along the way, that'll become cemented. Because first they'll keep you away, then they'll say things like, you better not be telling my business, da-da-da-da-da. So they'll condition you to keep things a secret. So you can't even get outside knowledge of, hey, do you go through this? Do you go through that? So you become to think that your own little bubble is normal, that other people is going through things in their own little bubble. Or you become a person who, is living in a dysfunctional family, and you experience a friend who has dysfunctional families, and maybe, they tell you a little bit of their dysfunction, and you're like, okay, so it is normal. But because you guys aren't going into the nitty-gritty details, you'll find that people's bad isn't your bad. So you never really, because I never really told them, I told them a little bit, but, I feel like they were always exaggerating. Like, they were always, like, really expressive about the things that were bad, that, but mine were horrible, and I always played them off like they weren't that bad. So that's another thing where you might not even know that you've went through this. You might not even know that it's not normal. You might think that this is normal. You might be around friends who, like attracts like, you might have only felt comfortable around people with dysfunction. I chose a partner, I remember it clearly, I was in college, but I chose, the spiritual warlock that worked at Walmart. Dealt with him for 10 years, been dealing with him for 10, 11 years. And oh boy, because I remember my decision for choosing him rather than somebody at my college, because I had people at my college that was interested. The people at my college, their median household income, you can tell, was just way more than Baltimore City. way more. So we didn't come from the same backgrounds. So I felt uncomfortable in that, maybe undeserving, didn't know how I was going to explain, my background. And him, he, he wasn't in college, come to find out, he did come from a dysfunctional Baltimore family. How, like, just something about him just seemed more familiar. And choosing that familiar over the unfamiliar, excuse me, got me my confirmation. Got me my 2 wonderful babies. But a whole hell of trauma that I had to unpack. Because he's emotionally avoidant. He's a covert narcissist. He is everything that my father is, that I thought that I wasn't getting at the time. I'm like, oh yeah, no, he's not like my dad. Yes, he is. Just different. But yes, he is. Oh my goodness. Yes, he is. So hang in there, right? What I do want to tell you is that the water of the womb is thicker. I mean, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. Blood is thicker than water. Who you choose, your chosen family, will always be stronger than your given family, than your birth family. You do not have to stay. You do not have to accept it. Okay? You don't have to accept people willing to throw away years of relationships because they're unwilling to take accountability for their actions. Some of them act like they never even did anything to you. They act like they had no responsibility to be there for you. Watch out for people like that. I called out people on my Facebook and they act like they had, like, our relationship just basically ended at that point. I mean, it ended before that, but because I went no contact. And some of these people never even reached out. Never even reached out. I spent hours and time and money, because I wanted to brighten up their day. And they couldn't even bother to send me a text, send me a phone call. Hey, you okay? Hey, how you doing? I'm really worried about you, can we talk? Is there anything you need? I really felt sometimes when you become so independent, people will admire you as well as resent you for it. They will put you on this pedestal where, because you're so independent and you've gotten through a lot of your battles, you've done things that they haven't done, they will deny you help. They will deny you the human experience of even needing help. Oh no, she got this, she can do it by herself. So they will contribute to your worstest moments, to your darkest moments. I've had at least a month. It was a month because he went on the road and he was driving all around the country and it was just me and my little one, and I was estranged, with no contact because, nobody was willing to watch my baby for me. Nobody, even if I paid. And then when I offered to pay them, it was like this exorbitant amount of money that they took, and I didn't know any better. And I offered it, and I was like, dang, I can't pay it. They would act like they didn't even want to watch them. They was acting like it was a secret, like they didn't want their family to know that they was getting paid for, that they was watching, not the media, but the outside. Oh, it was, I was treated very, to the side, like I wasn't important. And I worked overnight, so I would go to work all night in the ICU. It was at Shock Trauma, Maryland, to no less. Get off, pick up my baby, stay up all day, You know, sometimes I would fall asleep on him and he would just cry. Not for long, because, you know, he's right there, I'm right there, so I would obviously have to wake up. Maybe get a nap in when he get a nap, and get up and go to work. And I did that for a whole month straight, with where I will only sleep on my days off. That was it. And I worked 4 days a week. Well, sometimes 3 on, 4 off, 4 on, 3 off. So that was really rough. That was really rough. Like, oh my gosh, I feel like that took years off of me, to where as though when I stopped working, I got my years back. But when I stopped working, like, it took months of sleeping. When I say months, like even like a year and a half, I feel like I just stopped. I stopped working in 2024. I feel like this spring is when I just stopped being bone tired. You know? On top of all the energetic work that I've been doing. Like, it's been something trying to recover for years of working and going to school, from years of having to juggle not having the support, you know? But yet apparently I'm such a role model, you know? These people say how much I'm such a role model, but not enough for me to receive help. Not enough for you to reach out to me. Just enough for me to be an example for your children, for yourself. I'm not worth reaching out, but I'm worth mimicking big life choices after. So that's toxic. That's not okay. You know, and they never give you your props, you know, or it's weird and backhanded where you don't know if it's truly genuine, because they're not showing you genuine love. They're not giving you genuine support, you know. I want you to know that you're not the only one, that it's been way more things that I haven't talked about, but this is basically just the gist of it. You know, this was a lot of it. These were some of the things that caused the deepest and most long-lasting wounds. The chaos, the rejection, the abandonment, the betrayals. It's not normal. The competition between siblings, oh my goodness, so disgusting. The comparisons between your siblings, and then once you have children, between your children. It's not normal, and it's not okay, and it's not anything that you deserve, you know? And if everything seems to come back on you more harshly than everybody else, if you seem to be the one that's more attacked, if you seem to be the one that's had the most problems, kind of out of nowhere, right? Like that anxiety disorder, that was something supernatural. It really was. And it was because I was holding on too much. I was trying to do too much. I was like energetically, you know, I was tied to people who didn't value me. I knew it subconsciously, like on a soul level, and my body was just reacting to how unsafe I felt. I do want you to know that, like I said, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the womb of the water of the womb. So you can always choose your family. Choose those who value you, who appreciate you, who shows genuine love and support, that what you give, you get, that you are not a horse, you're not a slave. You know, I was thinking about that yesterday because I had to do some healing yesterday. I am not an emotional, a mental, a physical, an energetic slave. That it is okay for me to receive. A lot of Black sheep have problems with receiving love, have a lot of problems with recognizing reciprocity, reciprocal relationships, have a lot of problems with people pleasing, with abandonment wounds, with rejection, with self-worth, because they were taught at a young age that they weren't. They were criticized and demonized and thrown off to the side and abused mentally, physically, emotionally. So I'm here, and I'm here to tell you there is another side to it, okay? You know, it takes a lot of healing, it takes a lot of circles. You know, we can go into that later. We can go into the nitty-gritty later. I think I posted maybe some videos on it, but there's plenty more to come. Well, this is where I leave you, lovelies, whether you're a male or female, because don't discriminate. Your light don't discriminate. The darkness don't discriminate against your light. That's it.